call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.
What up? Welcome back once again to the Necro Zoo. I am Bones. And in this one, let's go ahead and add one more figure to my McFarlane DC Multiverse collection. Now today we will take a look at the collector's edition of Firestorm. Now this is the final figure from the second wave of this subline. Now I have done Hawkman. I also finished up Sinestro. And now we will take a look at Ronnie Raymond. Now pretty interesting. I did originally order this from Target. And surprisingly, the first time they did send me the Platinum Edition. So per usual, I will not be opening this one unless I come across another one. But it's pretty nice to get this for retail and add it to the Mint Inbox collection. So we'll hold on to that. But I did go ahead and turn around and order another one. And this time they did just send me the regular version. Now actually Firestorm does go back a long time in the DC Comics lore. We have received tons of figures based on him. I think he became more famous due to the old cartoon because he was a major spotlight in one of the versions of Super Friends. But he does look pretty nuclear in the packaging. But let's go ahead and take a closer look at him. But first, he does come with your standard black DC Multiverse stand. Now the only difference is that the collector's editions do have a silver DC stamp, but besides that they are the same as your standard version. Not really needed, but sometimes they do come in useful. He also comes with his data file card. On the front you do have some source material from the comics. Now interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure that the version they used for the picture on the card is actually the Platinum Edition version, not your classic Firestorm, also known as the Nuclear Man. But it is pretty cool to add this card to our collection. Now in the back you do have some information. In the storyline and in the comics, he's like a split entity between Ronnie Raymond and Dr. Stein or something like that. And there is also an alternate version of Firestorm. If you don't want to get into all the death storms and stuff like that. But yeah, pretty cool character. Classic for the DC Multiverse line. We'll hold on to this. As usual, you do get the card stand with these. Now, once again, as I said, these are starting to stack up. I do have a lot of these that I'm not going to be using. I do know that what they really want for you to do is to place the card in there and put it next to the figure. But the way I display my figures, it ain't going to happen. So we'll just hold on to this. Now, he does come with a ton of hands and sort of effect accessories at the same time, which is pretty interesting. Now, he does come with some effect hands, but I just went ahead and placed the two normal fists on him. I just prefer to review him like that, but I will show the other hands that he comes with. You do have two flying hands. Pretty sweet. You do have two emotion or emoting hands, one pointing finger and one sort of dramatic gesturing hand. You also have two effects hands. I really like this one. It's sort of like the gesturing hand, but with flames coming off of it. And then you have sort of open flying hand, but it does have sort of pulsing nuclear energy coming out of it. So that's pretty cool. Something you don't really see all the time. Pretty cool for the collection. And then finally, he does have two. Now, these are pretty innovative, I would have to say. They actually look like two fists from the front. So you get that effect of like nuclear energy. It's sort of like bubbling and, giving off a flame effect, but they actually pop onto the hands, and on the back are just more effect. So sort of like a 3D style, something like that, I would have to say. But pretty cool to start getting some different effects from McFarlane. So we'll add those to the collection as well. But let's go ahead and take a closer, more detailed look at this guy. First impressions. Now, I did have a certain image when I saw the reveals of him that I thought he was going to be too lanky or that I wasn't going to like him. But I must say, having him in hand, he is pretty good. I mean, he is your classic version of Firestorm. And they did kind of go out of their way to add new sculpt that we have never seen before, and a lot of cool details to the suit, which I thought was really interesting. But for all intents and purposes, this is your basic classic Firestorm. Actually looks really good. Another cool classic figure to add to your collection. And basically, the three from this wave have all been pretty good figures. So for first impressions, looks really good. Your classic Firestorm. Let's take a look at the head sculpt. Not let down by the head sculpt either. I'm really happy with it. Cool stern look on him. You know, he has that classic headgear, whited out eyes, which look really creepy. And then he has his flaming hair. They did add to the flames here and also to the effects sort of a orange, like yellowish wash. I'm not necessarily sure that it really needed that. I would pretty much be happy just with the translucent plastic, but it is something that they did add, so it's pretty good. Oh, now I am digging the head sculpt. Looks like a classic Firestorm. Let's take a look at the articulation. Looks down really well. Looks up. Awesome. You got right to left. And of course, you could tilt his head for some attitude. Always appreciated. Let's go ahead and go down now. This is one negative I have of this figure. I mean, I'll get into other things, but the like design of his suit, like they're kind of like straps or just like they're supposed to be like atomic flares or whatever that go around his suit. They are not done like very crisp. They're I don't want to say it, but they're kind of sloppily done. You could get by it. It doesn't really bother you. The dots are pretty much done all right. He has that big like circle sun on his chest on the left side, but I do think that it's just a little bit mishmashy. Like you could see like the lines aren't perfectly straight. I know it could have something to do with the contours of the costume and the way it kind of has to fit snug and at the same time be like a like a sun ray or whatever. But yeah, not the best job of the design of the costume on the upper chest, but it's pretty good, not too bad. Moving down, you got that classic belt. So this part of the figure, not my favorite, but I'll still give it a 7 out of 10. Not too bad. Let's take a look at the waist articulation. You do have side to side. You have the full tilt-a-whirl at the waist. You got a lower waist swivel, upper chest swivel. Can twist them, get them in some pretty nice action poses. He has a slight crunch. Not too much, but it is there. And of course, you can lean them back. And with the head articulation, get them in some pretty awesome flight poses. All in all, pretty good. Let's take a look at the shoulder now. This is pretty interesting because the bushing and shoulder socket are kind of under this like shoulder guard that kind of sticks out, which is, you know, classic design for Firestorm, but it does make for a little bit of different articulation. You do get a lot of range in there between the bushing and the movement of the shoulder. You got bicep swivel, double jointed elbows. They look passable, not the best. Straighten them out. Now we do got to remember that these sleeves are completely new, and at least they did go to the effort of making them sort of like poofy dress sleeves, which is what Firestorm usually wears. You got all the wrinkles and details in there, down into like a wrist guard, and then you got that sculpted wrist joint and into the fist. Now you do have the 4 ways of articulation from McFarlane, and on the other side you have the same thing. Pretty well executed. They didn't, cheapen us out on that. Everything is there that you would want from a classic Firestorm. Get him in a T-pose pretty simply and even a little bit higher. Moving his arms above his head is slightly limited, but you could still do it. Pretty nice. And then move down into the thighs. Let's take a look at the thigh swivel. A little bit tight, but it is there. I'm sure if you were to heat this up, you could break it up and get a little bit more range. But this does mean that you can move the boot from side to side without having a thigh cut. He kicks up pretty high and then kicks back as well. Now, do not be afraid, because the reason the trunks are made of rubber is so you could get that added range and motion. And when you put the legs back, of course, the trunks go back to their original shape. Cock out his knee. He got that McFarlane hip swivel. Double jointed knees. Now, those look a little bit better than the elbows. Straighten them out. Up and down at the ankle. You got right to left at the ankle, rocker, and of course toe articulation. Now before we go, let's take a complete look at the lower body. Now the legs do not have too much sculpture as texture wise. You do have the musculature of the thighs and everything, which actually look really good. And then you do have a sort of costume seam that runs down the side of the legs and down into the boots. Now, for me, the boots are a highlight of this figure. Tons of detail, tons of added texture, buckles and straps that you don't normally see, wrinkling in the cloth. I mean, just really good work by McFarlane. Now, I am not too sure if there's any reuse here. Looks to be like all new sculpt work, but I could be wrong about some parts, but it does look like a completely new sculpt for a figure, so that is always a plus. Take a look at them from the bottom. Sort of semi-tread with some identifying marks. It kind of looks like they wanted to put like a complete sort of like nuclear symbols and dots on here, but then they had to press in that marking for the identification of the figure. So I'm not sure, but okay. Move up the back. Great sculpt work on the back of the boots, into the back of the legs. Beautiful slight details that they give the suit with little wrinkles and stress marks up into the back. You got that, same costume stylized design. And the same thing, the lines are not exactly crisp. They're a little bit wavy, but it is passable for the figure. So all in all, pretty happy with him. I mean, he is a classic figure that everybody wants. Now you can pop off the hands very simply and add a different hand. That is not difficult at all. So McFarlane is actually getting really good with that part of the figures. You can add any of the effects. The effects I really enjoyed were were the sort of fist effects that actually come through the energy effects. Something I've never really seen before, but I thought was really cool and pretty somewhat new way to add effects to the figures. Pretty interesting for figure photography and stuff like that. You could get them in some pretty intense flight poses with these effects. Get that 3D effect. Look, actually these are my favorite of the accessories, except for the regular fists. So all in all, pretty happy with them. So something about getting the extra hands actually gives you a lot more choices for when you're posing him and getting him into different situations for figure photography. So I think that is pretty cool. Now, the only thing that I think was a negative on this one was actually that the card stand. I mean, everybody knows we don't really need these. And last time I said that Sinestro should have came with alternate hands instead of the card stand. And this time I'm going to say that he probably should have came with an alternate, like, angry head, because a lot of these energy force hands actually need for him to kind of be like in, like emotional, like giving him some sort of like he's battling or fighting. And I think that really would have worked out better to have an alternate angry head. Now, although that would have made me have to buy even another one to to display both heads, but I think for the regular collectors, that would have been a really nice added addition. Except for that card stand, we don't need the card stands really. But once again, it was pretty close. He is, pretty close to being worth that $30 price point. Now, before we go, let's do some uh, comparisons. I do have, actually, if you look it up, the original release from DC Universe Classics was actually the Jason Rosh version of Firestorm. And once they put out that one, that is your standard version, they actually did do a classic Ronnie Raymond. So, me, I have all of the DC Universe Classics figures. Now, I do enjoy these. They look really good. I especially like the head sculpts on these. But once again, they're ancient articulation. Some of the reuse on them is like pretty lazy, where they just painted on details to make the two different versions. So they are classic, cool figures for your DC Universe collection, but I've really moved on to these more detailed 7-inch figures. It's just something I really enjoyed. Now, one thing I thought was pretty interesting was these are actually the effects that came with the DC Universe Classics figures. Pretty old school design on them, but you can actually put these onto this DC Multiverse version of Firestorm, and they actually look pretty awesome. So that is another reason why I always say don't throw away your effects, don't throw away any of your fodder, just keep it all. Eventually, one day you may use it, but although it does give, the Firestorm figure a cool look, we do have this cool assortment of hands and effects that McFarlane provided. Now, let's take a look at them next to the Sinestro just to get some, scale in there. Now, they're both about the same size, but two pretty cool classic figures that everybody wanted for their collection. Now, do not forget, we do have the Deathstorm version of Ronnie Raymond. This is actually the same character, just in his Black Lantern version. So, as always, McFarlane expanding and opening up the character selection for us, because as always, it is pretty fun to have a wide range of selection of figures, from death metal to modern to classic and even to live action. It's cool to have a complete multiverse to choose from. And this guy is going to look pretty awesome and classic up there on the shelf. But you guys keep hunting out there, keep collecting, keep customizing, and I will see you on the next one.
They used to call me Crazy Joe, but now they can call me Fat Man.